Hello, world of crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and welcome back to Getting Started Making Games in GameMaker. So I think today I'm going to discuss a topic which isn't vitally important when it comes to making games, but it is something that you might consider doing once in a while, especially if you're making a game with, for example, real-time elements. And today we're going to talk about dealing with dates and times in GameMaker. So I have an empty project. This is not the test project that I've used in many of the previous videos. I'm just going to go take an empty room. I'm going to drop an empty object into it. I'm going to mess around a little bit in this empty objects draw event. And we are going to talk about dealing with dates and times in GameMaker. So there's a couple of different things that GameMaker contains for dealing with dates and times. The simplest is going to be a set of variables which are built into GameMaker, and they will automatically contain the current second, the current minute, the current hour, the current day, the current month, the current year, and last but not least, the current weekday. And these are a set of built-in global variables, which will be you can use them whenever and wherever you want as part of your GameMaker code. And these values are going to contain pretty much exactly what you think they're going to contain. So if I were to go and for example draw some text. And if you've never seen this before, by the way, if you hold the Alt key on your keyboard and click and drag with the mouse, you can create a rectangle selection, and you can like edit multiple lines of code at a time. It's probably my favorite text editor feature, and as far as I know, not a lot of people really know that it's there. Anyway, I'm going to just go and draw each of these values on screen. I'm going to not draw them all on top of each other. I will space them out a little bit. Maybe 32 pixels to the line, something like that. 192 should be next, and then 224. And this is simply going to draw on the screen a series of numbers which corresponds to the current second, the current minute, the current hour in 24-hour like timestamp format. It is 3 p.m. in the afternoon, so 15 using a 24-hour clock. It is the 5th of August, and the year is 2026, and the current weekday is 3. So today is a Wednesday, and the value of current weekday in GameMaker is 0 indexed from Sunday. So Sunday equals 0, Monday equals 1, Tuesday equals 2, etc. The current month, on the other hand, this is actually going to be 1 index starting from January. I often am not really a fan of 1 indexing as opposed to 0 indexing, but I think when it comes to the current month, it makes sense because, like, when you write down the current date, you don't 0 index from January. You use 1, and I think it makes sense here to keep it consistent. And these values don't really do anything. You can't, like, set the current month or whatever. These are read-only values. But if you do want to know the real-time time on your user system, perhaps for doing things like writing down the time and date of whenever they last saved, this can be a useful thing to have. Oh, and by the way, there is one more, and I'll probably talk a little bit more about this later, but there is current time. As opposed to containing any real-time elements, like pertaining to the actual, like, clock time and calendar on the user system, current time is going to represent the number of milliseconds since the game has started. So if your game has been running for, like, 5 minutes, that's 300 seconds, and that's going to be 300,000 milliseconds. This is not probably a value that you're going to use that often unless you really want to, like, time pieces of code or time events in your game. There is a more precise way of doing that I'll get to later in the video. Anyway, we're going to move on from that, and we're going to talk about another series of functions that GameMaker has to offer if you want to deal with dates and times, and that is going to be a function which is going to look like, we're going to start, I should say, with a function that's going to look like date create date time. And this is going to be a function which is going to return a unique timestamp given a certain number of inputs for the year, month, day, hour, minute, second. And you could, for example, say the year is 2026, the month is 8, the day is 5, the hour is, I suppose we'll go with 15, the minute is 9, and the number of second, I'm not going to look at the current time with, like, second precision. Let's go with 30. And this is going to create a unique timestamp, which we'll call, I guess I'll just call this var timestamp. So this function is going to return a number, but it is not going to be a number which, as I'm sure some of you have guessed, a Unix timestamp. This is actually going to be a different datetime format. And if you want to see exactly what this is, you can draw text at some position on the screen, that timestamp value. This is going to actually be a timestamp which represents the number of days since, I believe, January 1st, 1899 as the integral part, and like the fraction that you are through the day as the fractional part. This is kind of a weird datetime format. I believe this is the datetime format that spreadsheet software often use for timekeeping. I suppose sometimes spreadsheet software have a need for dates that go earlier than January 1st, 1970. Anyway, if you wanted to see this update in real time, I suppose we could go and fill in, and I'm going to spread this over multiple lines. Current year, current month, current day, current hour, current minute, current second. And if I display this to the user on the screen, we're not actually going to see it updating in real time, even though in theory it should be. It did tick over from 0.92 to 0.93 there. I will need to actually go and, when GameMaker displays a number as part of a string, it will automatically truncate it to 2 decimal places, so we can use a string format function. Let's give it 6 decimal places, and that will force GameMaker to format the string with more than 2 decimal places. And we can see that this value is updating in real time. So there is a sister function to go with date, create datetime. If you do want a datetime which corresponds to, like, immediately now, you can also say date current datetime, and this will do the exact same thing, but it will create a datetime that just contains basically this, with whatever the current time and date is. And if I run this now, we'll see that this is pretty much the same as it was, updated by like 30 seconds. Because some time has elapsed since the last time I ran the game. Alright, I would not worry yourselves, I would not concern yourselves with exactly, like, what data is contained within the datetime, like, format. As long as it works consistently, it doesn't really matter if it's Unix time or if it's something else. This is not a value which you should ever have to manipulate yourself, because there's another set of functions which you can use, which are going to say something like date get day, date get hour, date get minute, and I'm not going to go and write out the rest of them because there are quite a few of them, and you can probably guess what most of these do. For example, date get year. And if you want to extract particular, like, hour, minute, second, whatever values from one of these GameMaker timestamps, you can pass it into the date get day, date get hour, etc. functions, and you can figure out what exactly that is. So if I pass, let's go date get hour into the, we'll pass the timestamp into this date get hour function, and I can't really call this current hour, can I? Because that is going to be a reserved variable name. Let's call it now hour. And if I were to go and draw this value on the screen, we would be able to see that this is going to return a 15, because the current hour is going to be 15 as encoded in this timestamp. If I were to go and, why did I click out of there? If I were to go and create some other date time, and just for fun, let's go and say the year can be 2020, the month can be January, the day can be the 23rd, the hour can be probably like 12 minute second. This is the if memory serves, the particular date where I learned of a funny little virus that was doing the rounds in China, which I consider the last normal day of my life. And we can go and, for example, extract the hour from that timestamp. We could also go and extract the, perhaps, year from that timestamp. And we can see that this is going to basically regurgitate the values that we put into creating that timestamp. So that is somewhat useful. You can go both ways when creating these date times. You can create a date time from, like, particular times. You can extract information from a date time. We also have, if you're a fan of elapsed time, there's a series of functions that are going to be date inc day and date inc minute and date inc, let's say, year. We also have date inc week if you want, if you like. This is going to increment a particular one of these datetime timestamps by a certain amount. So if you want to create a timestamp, and if you want to advance this time by, let's say, 5 days, this will be January 28th, 2020. We can take the result of that. We can save it to a variable. This will return a new timestamp. It will not modify the original in any way. So the original timestamp is still going to be the one that we created up here. The advanced time is going to be the one that we modified. And if I were to go and let's take this, let's draw these values after we make that modification. I will also need to go and change the values. So I'm going to need to date get hour that new timestamp before I do anything with it. This is going to go and tell us that our current day is, I didn't actually check the day, did I? I wanted the date get day. And we can actually check that value. This should be 28, 5 days past January 23rd. If I wanted to, advance it by a larger amount, for example, I could also check the month like this, and let's spread these out nicely. If I were to advance this by, say, 15 days, this should give us sometime in the middle of February. All right, that is going to be the 7th of February, if I'm reading this correctly. I have not actually done that calculation in my head. I'm going to assume that's correct. So if you want to take a particular timestamp, and if you want to forecast into the future for any reason, you can use the date get day, and you can use the date inc day, day inc month, day inc year functions for that to increment time. You can also go and sort of do the inverse of this, and instead of elapsing time yourself, you can check how much time has elapsed by using the date minute span, the date day span, the date month span, date year span. So I have some like mild beef with these functions, and that pretty much all the other functions and variables for dealing with dates and times are going to have like in the name of the function. So it's going to be like date whatever minute, date whatever day, date whatever month, based on what operation you're doing. But with the elapsed time functions, it's going to be reversed. So you have date minute span instead of date span minute. And I would much prefer that it would be the other way around. Now that I say that out loud, I should probably like actually bother Yo-Yo Games about straightening this out in their future GameMaker, like their future GML version, GML3. But that's I'll do that later. Anyway, the date minute span, date day span, etc. All these functions, these are going to tell you how many units of time have elapsed between two timestamps. So if I were to call this, I'm gonna make a second one. We can call this timestamp then, and I could save our timestamp now is going to be date current date time. So if I have these two date times, and if I want to figure out exactly how much time has elapsed between them, I could say var elapsed minutes equals date minute span between timestamp then and timestamp now. If I wanted to see how many, let's say how many elapsed years, I could use the date year span function like this. If I wanted to see how many days have elapsed, which is probably the more like mildly interesting value to, I don't know. I probably shouldn't say that elapsed days is the most frequently useful, like, one of these metrics, because it depends on what you're trying to do with them, which one you'll find useful. But anyway, I could go and say the elapsed minutes is going to be some value. We can display this all on the screen. We could also display the elapsed years, elapsed days, and elapsed years should obviously be 6.5. It is second half of 2026 versus the beginning of 2020, and the elapsed days is apparently 2,386. Elapsed minutes is this horrifically big number in the 3.5 million range. All right. So that is elapsed time. What other datetime functions are there that I want to talk about? There's a couple of miscellaneous ones. If you type date and then control space, you will see the entire like list of built-in functions that involve dates and times. So there's the date compare, date compare, date time, and date compare time functions. These are, at least to me, not that interesting. Also, on the subject of keyboard shortcuts, I've done this a couple of times in this video, but if you Control D on the keyboard or Command D on a Mac, you will duplicate the current line. I get the feeling that a lot of people discover that one by accident, like they mean to hit Control S and they miss and they hit Control D instead and it duplicates their current line. But Control D to duplicate a line is occasionally useful if you want to, like, write out a bunch of similar lines like this. It also works in the asset browser if you want to duplicate an asset in the asset browser. And some other places. Anyway, date compare date, date compare date time, and date compare time. So these functions are all going to return, as you can see from the code help tooltip over here. It's just going to be a comparative function, so it's going to return -1 if date 1 is earlier. It's going to return 0 if both dates are the same, and it's going to return +1 if date 1 is later. If date 2 is earlier. I'm sorry, I was just reading that text. This can be useful if you want to do things like compare if two save files, like if you want to compare what the older save file is, if they both have a timestamp, that kind of thing. Alright, I guess I'll show this off. So if I draw text 32, 160, drop down a couple lines, date compare date time, we can compare timestamp then to timestamp now. This should return +1, if I understood that correctly, because timestamp now is later than timestamp then. No, it returns -1. Okay, did I get that backwards? I guess I got that backwards. Alright, I got that backwards. Anyway, if you just care about comparing the date, or if you just care about comparing the time, you could also use the other two equivalent functions. I'm not really interested in spending any more time on this than I have. What other date time functions are there that I might want to... you know what? Date time string. So, this is worth talking about, because if you want to... take one of these date times that are going to be like 46,000 and some number and some decimal. And if you want to actually format this as like August 5th, 2026 at this and that, like AM, PM, whatever, you can use the date time string function. And if I were to take timestamp now, and if I were to feed that into the date time string function, I'm going to go and again draw this on the screen. And we are going to see exactly what this spits out. So date time string is going to, on my system as a user of computers in North America, this is going to print out 8/5/2026 at 3:25:59:60 p.m. This will localize your time. So if you are in a part of the world that uses the day, month, year timestamp instead of the month, day, year timestamp, then you will see that reflected when you call date time string. All this does is it basically asks the operating system's like time localization function for a timestamp, and it will print it out like this. So if you ever want to, for example, display the date and time of a last save file to a user, and you want it to be localized to whatever like worldly locale they happen to be located in, you don't have to worry about that. You can just call date time string, and that will do it for you. I don't know off the top of my head if there are any other date formats other than day, month, year, or month, day, year. I wish year, month, day would be standardized, because then it would also serve to sort like file names alphabetically, but that's a me problem. Let's see, moving on from that, there's also date string, and there should be somewhere in here date time string if you only want the date or if you only want the time. Date val date time, this kind of makes me laugh. It would never occur to me that this is actually something that you want to, like, actually, you know, pay attention to. Except it, by all accounts, is part of the GameMaker language, and I guess at some point somebody thought it was enough of a problem that it was worth adding to GameMaker. You might have noticed that date valid date time, this will reject dates and times earlier than the beginning of the Unix epoch. I don't exactly know why, because as we discussed earlier, this is not a Unix timestamp, and it should be valid down to about 1900. But if you want to invent a datetime 2026 5, like, I don't know, 12, 12, 12, or something like that. This will tell you if this is a valid date time, which it should be. If I wanted to do another one, for example, earlier than 1970, so if I wanted to go like 1962, something like that, this should not be a valid date time. And I also believe that if you try to do something like take the month of February and put like 30 days in it, it should also tell you that this is not a valid date time. So if I run this now, alright, that is indeed exactly what it does. So this, like, a date time that actually makes sense is a valid date time. A date time before 1970, as it said, is a valid date time. A date time that tries to put 30 days in February is a valid date time. I imagine, although I've never really rigorously tested this, that if you also try to put like 45 hours in a day, it will reject that. That seems like the sort of thing that this is supposed to do. Yeah. Alright. That's fun. Is that documented on the valid date time page? I haven't actually read the manual on this since like GameMaker 8. It does not really explicitly tell you that you can't put 30 days in February. I guess it just kind of assumes that you would already know that. Anyway, that is probably not useful that often. Why do I keep writing draw? That's probably not that useful that often, but I do enjoy that it exists.
Hey.
Are there any others? Date set time zone. This, I feel like, should be a useful function, but I can't really say I've ever had to use it. This will allow you to set the dates and times relative to your computer system to either localize to your current time zone. For example, GMT -4, I believe I am in the summer. Or you could use universal coordinated time for all your dates and times. So let me go and let's rewind a little bit. Should I? Let me take this current date time function. Let me draw this on the screen as date time string, and then let me take the date set time zone function. And if I were to set that to time zone underscore UTC. And if I were to do the same thing again, I should see a different date time, but I should see it in universally coordinated time. And because this will persist after, like, between frames, I will want to set it back before I draw the date time, like, the first time. Anyway, if I run this now, I should see, yes, indeed. So on the top row, I have the current time as per my current time zone. Windows 11, at least by default, does not actually show a clock. It only shows the calendar when you click down here, which is, I guess, a design choice that Microsoft decided to make. And on the bottom row, we have the same date, but the time is going to be 10:32:24 p.m., and that is going to be the current time in UTC. Does Windows think I'm in, like, California time or something? Like, the time is correct. It is 3:32 p.m. in the afternoon, but, like, that is a 7-hour difference and not a 4-hour difference. Speaking of dates and times, this particular installation of Windows that I'm on has had issues in the past, like, not knowing what time zone I'm in. Like, sometimes it'll show the correct time, and sometimes it'll show the time in, like, California time. I guess because Microsoft lives in Washington State on the West Coast. And I feel like it's giving me the correct time, but it seems to think I'm in California time when it comes to the local time zone for some reason. I mean, I guess there's also the possibility that GameMaker is bugged, but I feel like in this, my intuition tells me that it's more likely that Windows is not working correctly in this particular situation. Anyway, I've never had to use the date set time zone function, but if that is something that you think would be useful to mess with, then feel free to use the date set time zone function. All right, so there's one last thing I'd like to talk about when it comes to dates and times, and that is going to be circling back to the current time value. So I mentioned that the current time value is going to tell you the number of milliseconds since your game has started. There's also a very similar but somewhat more precise way of getting this value, and that is going to be the get timer function. And the only difference between the current time global variable and the getTimer function is that the current time global variable is going to return the number of milliseconds since the game has started, and the getTimer function is going to return the number of microseconds since the game has started. And if you're not familiar with your SI prefixes, milliseconds is 1/1000th of a second, and microseconds is 1/1,000,000th of a second. Which means that the getTimer function is more precise, but otherwise these two things do exactly the same thing. So if I were to run the game now, you would see that both of the first couple numbers, and if I click the title bar, it'll actually freeze. Both the first four numbers of the getTimer function and the current time value are going to be the same. Or I should say, if you chop off the last three numbers in the getTimer value, it's going to be the same as the current time function. And that is indeed because getTimer does return basically the same thing as current time, but to a higher degree of precision. You can use this if you want to time things like how long it takes individual tasks to complete in your game. I use this for benchmarking code all the time to see how code performs if I'm in a situation where the profiler isn't really going to be a practical thing to use. You could use this for something like setting the RNG seed in GameMaker. I talked about random number generation in GameMaker a couple of videos ago, although practically speaking, it's probably better to just call the randomize function and be done with it. I find these two variables are more useful for diagnostic purposes than for actual gameplay purposes. But since they are part of GameMaker, and since they do fall under the umbrella of date and time related functions, I thought I might as well mention them here. Anyway, I think I've covered all the broad categories of functions inside the date and time set of functions in GameMaker. Oh, you know what? Date is today and date is leap year. This could be interesting. So date, I guess if you wanted to figure out like directly if a date is today without having to like extract the current day and the current year and comparing them to current day and current year, you could use date is today for this. Date is leap year if you wanted to figure out if a year is a leap year. So if you put in a number, is this going to be like a year itself or a date time? It looks like it is going to actually accept a date time. Instead of just directly inputting a year. And if you wanted to see if, for example, this year is a leap year, we could go and use that function. If you wanted to see if some other date time representing, for example, let's say 2020 was a leap year. This would tell you if 2020 was a leap year. If you wanted some other year, you could test how robust this is if you really wanted to. For example, does GameMaker correctly know that the year 2000 was a leap year, but the year 1900 wasn't? For those of you who don't know the rules when it comes to you don't like 1900, fine. 2100 will be another test date then. For those of you who don't know the rules for leap years, years that are divisible by 4 are leap years. Most people know that part. Years that are divisible by 100 are not leap years unless they are divisible by 400. So the year 2000 was a leap year because 2000 is divisible by 400, but 2100, despite being divisible by 4, is not because it isn't even 100. This is not something that is probably going to affect anyone alive today, although, I don't know, 2026, some of you might still be around at 2100. But that's the rule. It's probably not something that you'll have to take into account when writing down, like, February 29th in the year 2100 and remembering if it is, in fact, February 29th or not. Certainly, nobody alive today is going to have to worry about writing down the wrong date on their, like, homework or anything, for any of those reasons. But that's fun. I think that's going to be a good place to end this off. My name is Michael. I like Wizards and Dragons and making games. If you have any creative uses for these functions, let me know. The date leap year function, if I saw correctly, did actually directly call out you can use this for things like Easter eggs in your games. So you can let your imagination run wild for that. In the meantime, I like to post videos on all kinds of stuff you can do in GameMaker, so if anything like this appeals to you, feel free to subscribe. I like to post both beginner-oriented videos and more complicated, advanced-oriented videos. I also have a Patreon, so if you'd like to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places, and if you felt like pledging, I definitely would appreciate it. You should all go check out Wizarducks and the Lost Hat, which is one of the games that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. I will not confirm or deny the existence of any Easter eggs that may or may not happen if you were to play the game on a February 29th. I hope you all found this useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Zach Robinson, Squarecrow, Spy Games, Pixelated Pope, Paradox, Nykotic, Manta Ray, GameMaker, GameArt Indie, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, Bokeh Dev, and Argo the Knot for supporting these videos. If you want to join their ranks and contribute to the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.